Oh, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bokar Cham. I work for Anglo Gold Ashanti, which is a gold mining company in the Kuala Lumpur. We have operation in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Egypt, then in Argentina, in Brazil, in Las Vegas, and Colombia, actually. So it's a pleasure to chair this panel, and the title is Resource Extraction, Vulnerable Communities. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us. The panel discussion, this session brings together actually an international group of scholars to examine the profound socio-political, economic, and cultural reconfiguration that when resource extraction collides with local populations. Far from being isolated economic activities, mining and extraction fundamentally shape human geographies, governance structures, and everyday survival. In this panel, I have Tony Boss.
Yeah, that's good.
She's a professor of law and legal studies at the Carleton University. Right?
Yeah.
And then we have Zao Carlos. Yes.
It's chilly.
Okay. He holds a master's degree in industrial and labor sociology.
Okay.
And currently he's pursuing a PhD in legal studies and law at the University of Ottawa, right here.
Carleton University.
Carleton University, right? Okay.
Very important distinction.
Oh, Carleton University. Yeah. And then we have Dengue Fia. It's like everyone knows you now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a political scientist, actually, currently serving as a research analyst at the Center for Democracy in Nigeria. And he is also doing a PhD. Nigeria, okay. All right. And then we have Laura. Or is it Laura Kilburn, right?
Yes.
Okay. Laura is a rising PhD student at UMass, University of Massachusetts in Boston. Boston, they have a global governance and human rights and security department. That's where she's doing. I think some of you listened to her. So the papers in this panel offer diverse global perspectives, spanning West Africa, Southeast Asia, and Southern Africa. How vulnerable communities navigate crises and adapt to the presence of uncertainty. Gender and social reproduction. Today we open the conversation with Kenny Foucault, right? Social reproduction and gendering of social value.
Great, thank you. Okay. Hi there. I know he did. I pressed the wrong button.
Okay.
And thank you. It's great. Okay, sorry, apologies for that. Okay, so the paper that I'm going to talk about today comes out of research that I've been doing with colleagues, Blair Rutherford at Carleton University, colleagues in Kenya, Alawoko Otieno and Sarah Kinyanjui in Kenya. But we also have colleagues working on artisanal and small-scale mining and gender in Mozambique, and Joao is going to talk a little bit about that research. And Professor Aisha Ibrahim, who's from the University of Sierra Leone. And we also have an ongoing collaboration, very welcome one, with Joanne Lebert at Impact. But it's the Kenya research that I'm going to draw from today. But in this project with the 3 countries, what we've done is we've selected a gold, artisanal, and small-scale mine site in each country that we go back to each year. And the project, ideally each year, some years we can't make it for various reasons, but we've been doing this since between 2015 and 2020. 2026. So some of the research is ongoing. And I'm going to talk about some things that came up in the context of our research in Kenya. But the thinking for this paper and the title came because I've been thinking about the ways in which, particularly in international policy sites, we see expressions of caring about women and caring about artisanal small-scale mining. So this particular photo is from the sustainability plan for the Royal Canadian Mint. And they call their plan Minting with Care. And what's interesting about this is that, of course, in a recent New York Times expose, the Canada's mint is actually gold held in its mint is actually connected to Colombian drug cartels. So perhaps not the version of care they're thinking of. I'm curious about the ways in which these expressions of care are mobilized in ways that embed and solidify particular claims about mining and due diligence and the ability to have gold mining supply chains that are free from human rights abuses, worse forms of child labor, widespread sexual violence, and the like. And that was really where the origin of this came from. And because there's a puzzle in that you have these expressions of care and concern and some also celebration, actually, of women and of artisanal and small-scale mining in some circles. But you also have the promotion of different policy interventions that work against those expressions of care or celebration of women. And so it's that puzzle that I'm trying to work through. So what I'm going to talk about today is some research that emerged or consolidated really after I submitted the abstract. So it's going to take a slightly different shape. So the research that we've been working on in Kenya also explored the ways in which policymakers there are starting to talk about women, particularly in their 2016 mining policy. But you also see expressions of concern, care, and celebration of women in mining by men in the gold mining area that we've been studying. So the puzzle that we're trying to work through in this paper that is co-authored with Sarah Kinyanjui and Aluoko Ochieno is that you also have this promotion of professionalizing of ASM. And by professionalizing this, our efforts to try to give artisanal miners more access to financing, equipment, technology, formalization, which we talked about a lot in the last panel. So I'm going to draw from research that we've been doing in one mine site in Western Kenya, which is called Osiri, or some of the locals call it Matanda, which is on the border with Tanzania near Lake Victoria. We've been visiting that. We visited that mine site 8 times over 10 years. So this is also a little bit about changes in the life cycle of a mine. And the core focus of the paper that I want to draw out is about this tension, or this puzzle, as I'm putting it, that you've got ongoing changes in this site. You have changes in the gender division of labor over time, which I probably won't get time to talk about today. But what we did find was the emergence of women who'd made enough money from their gold mining livelihoods to be able to invest in certain kinds of mid-tier mining businesses. At the same time, we start to see increased investment into gold mining in this area, increased mechanization, and new kinds of gold mining, gold processing, some of which has happened because of donor investment, projects trying to improve formalization of ASM. And we're seeing material changes in the quality of the gold. So the core argument that we're making in this paper is that what we saw was that access to material, the tailings that had value, actually were reduced for the women who were at the mid-tier of their business as business owners. So that increased investment into, in this case, cyanidation, actually increased inequality in accessing more and profitable livelihoods for everybody. I think for those not separated by class, but that impact was very much gendered. And so that's the argument that we trace in the paper, and that I'm going to talk about in my paper today, in my comments today. So the puzzle that we work through is that women miners are both valorized and cared about, but also rendered disposable at the same time. And so the reason why women are often talked about, I think, by both policymakers and by male miners is this, this increased recognition that women are an important part of the gold ASM process, and estimated to be 30% is a general figure used, though in gold mining it can often be much higher than that. But that you also have these international donor projects aiming to professionalize the sector. So these two things really seem to be pulling against each other. So in the mine site, well, we see donors who are having expressions of care and projects on women. You also hear from men about how important it is and women's livelihoods are in artisanal small-scale gold mining. So as one man said to us when we asked him, well, women, should women mine? He said, well, of course, women are even stronger than men. They struggle to make a living, but women are feeding their children. They have more independence here, he said, and they don't have to depend on men for money. And we heard comments very similar to this throughout the many years that we were in the site. Others really celebrated women and said they're the ones who are really doing well in this site. Women, as one man put it, they're the ones that are winning. They are doing well. So you have this kind of valorization and recognition of women, but as we're going to show, there's a way in which women lose out. So to explain some of the reasons why there's this discrepancy, we explore in the paper the gender divisions of labor. And I think Alison's paper in the previous session also works this through very nicely. Generally, you find women above ground. They're the ones doing the processing in this hard rock gold mine site. Land and mine pit owners are mostly men. Very few women own a mine shaft. Some do, but it's very rare. There are many norms and reported rules prohibiting women from going into mine shafts to dig, which is the more lucrative position as a laborer. And so you find women doing various roles across the mining supply chain, which itself has multiple stages. So you can find women that are doing scavenging type roles, sweeping up debris to reprocess, or they might work for a small amount of monetary compensation to help with processing activities. Or they might be owners of mining installations that are processing oriented, or they might own shops where vending takes place. And there's a big market within the middle of this mine. This gender division of labor is often talked about and reproduced in all kinds of literature, but it's actually way more variable. And I think this came through in Alison's paper as well. In the paper, we track the ways in which it actually changes over time, but I'm not going to talk about that today. So what we did see for a time is this rise of a mid-tier of women business owners. And these were women who had some education. They arrived at the mine site reasonably early in the boom, and they were able to leverage their gold winnings in order to invest. And they invested in ponds where the washing takes place, which is called in Daluo Odawa. And some of them also, and those pictures feature Odawa. And some of them also own ball mills, but where the crushing takes place, but that's a lot more common, a lot less common rather. Let me just make sure I'm not skipping ahead too much. So what happens when women were allowed to own the Odawa, in part because they couldn't go below ground. Odawa owners made money because when the soil is washed to separate out the gold flakes, soil remains in the bottom of the ponds, which is then removed, and it actually holds still a lot of tailings, a lot of gold. So estimates suggest that in this site, the soil that's worked with mercury, usually by women, will recover maybe about 30% of the gold. And people will say, but you can recover more by reprocessing the tailings. And so initially, the tailings were seen as not having very much value, right? And people didn't really know how to rework it. The technology available for reworking wasn't that great. And women had control over this as part of the value chain. This began to change throughout the course of our research. So in 2016, our second year of visiting the site, we began to see signs for trucks to go to an elution plant, a cyanide leaching plant. And there was just the one. By 2024, government officials told us there were over 200 known leaching plants in Migori. So leaching plants use cyanide over usually 3 big basins of chemicals. You put the soil into these basins, or it could be processed rock, or it could be the tailings left over from the first level of processing. And over time, the chemicals start to break down the soil, and so that the gold remains. And it's highly effective. So you can get a recovery, some people say, of up to 90% of the gold from this soil. So quite a bit of difference from mercury. They're also very expensive to build. They're located nearby, but away from the gold mining area. So they tend to have different financiers, and they tend to generate different kinds of knowledge about gold and the reefs that are being worked at any given time. So most of the research suggests that they deepen inequalities, right? They remove access to mining from local people who might be actually in mine sites, and they move it slightly off center. It's not a very labor intensive, it's a chemically intensive processing activity. So what happened when the solution or the cyanidation plants entered into this area? It wasn't just, so there's both a chemical and technical change, but there was also a change in the way, in social meanings around waste and value. So where one time cyanide, which is the local term for tailings, were thought of as being waste. One example of a man who explained this to us. So we thought they were waste so women could have them. But that changed with the introduction of these plants. And as one man, male miner, pointed out to me in a recent visit, he said, we're sensitive to value here, and the value of tailings is now known. It's the gold bank, is how they understood the tailings. And so at that point, women's access to the tailings changes. 3 minutes, and that's handy because I'm getting to the end. So what changed was that not just the introduction of the technology, but also the introduction of a new rule by male shaft owners. And the new rule was that any of their diggers who were paid in unprocessed gold-bearing ore, they were no longer allowed to have that ore processed at any Odawa of their own choosing. They had to process it at the shaft owner's own Odawa. So shaft owners started to build their own Odawa, and they no longer relied on these women. And so that meant that the reef gold and good quality ore was being channeled into only certain Odawa that could be owned by women if they had contacts with or familial connections with the male shaft owner. The women who did not have that connection were left to relying upon the women who did scavenging work, who brought their sort of scavenged debris to the site for reprocessing. So what the paper shows is that it's not just the introduction of this new technology that changed the value chain, but also the introduction of very specific rules by authorities that made that challenge, and that removed women from the value chain. What's important, I think, about this finding is that you have these contending kind of processes. On the one hand, the valuation of women, we value them, we care, women are doing well in mining. But then you also have a celebration of formality, of professionalizing ASM. And these two agendas don't seem to necessarily talk to each other. And in this case, we can see how one agenda, the introduction of a high degrees of mechanization and new processing, is actually removing women from the value chain. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Next presentation is about the politics of silence and attentions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when extraction speaks, others stay silent. politics of environmental attention in Niger Delta. Over to you, Benefia.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. For those of you that attended the last one, I thought it's not as controversial as the last one. I've just deleted. Yeah, so I basically want to answer this question. So when extraction pollution coexists with other environmental challenges, which problems are prioritized and why? So I'm speaking on this within the context of the Niger Delta. So some of us that attended the last presentation must have seen this. Niger Delta is a part in Nigeria, it's in the southern part of Nigeria, Africa's largest river delta. About 30 million people depend on it for survival, 5% of the world's mangrove. So basically, just to show you how important this ecosystem is. And if you look at the downside of the map, where you have that very brown, that color there, that's the Niger Delta in Nigeria. The predominant occupation is fishing and farming, and communities that basically live within the waterways. So that's the Niger Delta. Yeah, so it has, this is how it looks like. I've said it before, I don't like the middle picture because it basically shows some level of, crude oil, and I wanted a situation where I had a pristine picture. But unfortunately, I couldn't find one. So the Niger Delta is one of the world's most polluted places on Earth, Amnesty International. So on the average, there are about only 10 spills across Europe. But from, but in the Niger Delta, if you look at it, just in 1 year, in 2014, you had 50 oil spills. So basically to make the point that it would take 55 years for Europe to record the kind of spill that happens in the Niger Delta in 1 year, just to show you how very devastating oil has caused in that particular environment. And of course, oil was discovered in 1956 in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta, a place called the Trabag, close to Olebiri. So this is some sort of the environmental damage that you see, the fact that oil companies and all of that. These are some of the, this is very regular in the Niger Delta. So you can always get all of these pictures any day, any single time you go to a particular community in the Niger Delta. You have a community where you can take this kind of pictures. So it's very predominantly polluted. This is some sort of the effects of pollution that you see in the Niger Delta. Life expectancy, it's about 40 years. So I will usually say to my colleagues outside Africa that, when they say life begins at 40, in the Niger Delta, it's almost coming to an end at 40. Yeah, so these are some of the challenges of pollution in the Niger Delta, which of course are well documented in the literature. Of course, it's not just the oil companies. We also have artisanal crude oil refiners and co-polluters. So if you attended my last presentation, I explained this very, very well. However, there's a danger of a single story in the Niger Delta and also that in the literature, and that is the core of this presentation. It is not true that it is just oil-related pollution that exists in the Niger Delta. Being a delta, very close to the sea bank, almost below the sea level and all of that, it has its own very peculiar environmental challenges, which of course I am sure every environment, natural environment has. However, the challenge is that when oil exploration began in 1956, all the attention began to focus on the extractive industries in ways that if you decide to Google the Niger Delta now, I am sure 80% of the researches that will come up is focused on oil-related pollution. My argument is that automatically does not take away the pre-existing environmental challenges. And I have said that is some sort of, environmental attention displacement. Because what has happened is that, even if you take out the pollution of the oil companies away from the Niger Delta, those pre-existing challenges will be there. However, communities in those places are not brought into the conversation because, for example, they don't have oil. So I visited my friend in this particular community called Ogbogoro. I went to his place and I wondered why he was renting a house because when I visited his house in the community in 2015, he had a house. And then he told me that, that's the house. The house is now in the river. That was about 4 years ago. Now that house is almost at the middle of the river. This community does not have oil. This community does not have extractive industry in it. However, these stories are not being told because it is not extractive related. And I will tell you why. When extractive industry goes to a particular place, it carries out, it perpetrates pollution on a very large scale, which means that some sort of a COVID-19 kind of experience, where when COVID-19 came, every other thing became very important. And we all focused on COVID-19. All the journals were having special issues. I know how many of my friends were able to publish in special issue journals because of COVID-19. Now, that is what extraction causes. When it goes to a place, it blinds all other kinds of pollution, and we are all focused on it. I've heard DR Congo. Nobody has talked about DR Congo within the context of other pollutions. It's mining. I've heard about Ghana. What about other pollutions? But that is not the single story of pollution in that environment, or even environmental challenge in that environment. So my challenge is, why, as scholars, why are we not looking at it? Because also looking at extraction alone create hierarchies in those communities that, creates further marginalizations. Now, why does that happen? The second reason is that there's some sort of accountability. The multinational oil companies go there and then there is protest against them. Shell can pay. When Shell pays, communities benefit and all of that. So all environmental defenders would like to, attack, some sort of direct their attention to who they can hold responsible and have some sort of, I don't want to say profit, but some sort of, returns in what regard. So you see that if you look at the environmental defenders in the Niger Delta, and you can check, you will not see environmental defenders mainly that say, okay, I am trying to protect this seashore area. But if you find, you are going to see tens of environmental defenders, talking about protection of oil and oil facilities or environment related to oil in my community. That is because it is profitable. NGOs in the Niger Delta are also dealing with, despite the fact that it is the third largest mangrove in the world, they're also dealing with extraction because it is profitable. And so that is what it causes. The second, the other one, again, I'll just skip some of these ones. One I think that it's very, very, very important to my heart is that I was discovered in 1956, for example. I was born in 1993, so I was born into pollution. So I've never seen an environment, I have not seen the Niger Delta, beyond oil-related pollution issues and discourse. Tuned in. So the whole idea is, so you have a whole generation of people in the Niger Delta that thinks that oil pollution is the major problem and the only problem of the Niger Delta, which is not actually, true. So this is a very early paper. Mine is just a call to say that when we look at extractive industry-related pollution in various environments, we should also realize that there are communities that are among them, between them, that experience severe issues of environmental challenges and pollution that are not related to extractive industry-related activities. And when we go with our activities as NGOs, as government interventions, we focus on particular communities and neglect those communities in between. We are also creating power hierarchies. We are also creating a situation whereby some voices of some communities are so loud in the environmental space and the others are not loud. So we are ensuring that one environmental issue is more important than the other. And if you ask me, it is just simply about political economy and basically profitability of the extractive industries and how NGOs and sometimes all of us as researchers have tapped into, because that is what gets the funding and that is what basically fuels the kind of work that we do. So mine is just a call, and I'm waiting to get ideas on how I can take this research forward and also have the communities that are not experiencing extractive industries also have their voices on the table alongside the extractive industries related communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next presentation is about the struggle for control, actually, and that's by Zhao, who will take us to Mozambique, actually, with state, mining operators, local population in the struggle for control of mining in Manica, right? Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Polako.
And I'm going to get the.
Oh, sorry. Did I again? There you go. Go ahead.
And there's.
We want to come here. I can do it from here too, if you want.
Do you want to?
Or do you want to? I can.
Maybe easier just to.
Yeah, just do it.
For me, first time is most important to make this question. What this means to talk about environment is in artisanal mining compared to informality. For African society, this question is most important. The strongest make their own laws and impose them. There is not enough knowledge about environmental protection.
Next slide.
Just say next slide and he'll do it for you.
Sorry.
Just say next slide. You're right. There you go.
Okay, this is Manica district. As you can see, Manica is located in central area of Mozambique, and with different two countries, one country soil, Zimbabwe, more or less South Africa. This means that Manica is always the time invited, taken by so many immigrants who seek the gold in Manica land. In sub-Saharan Africa, agriculture and subsistence farming directly employs tens of millions of people. Most activity is informal, as resistance is often expensive and bureaucratic situation. The illegality resulting from numerous social problems and the environment impacts of the sector has led many subsistence farmers who now depends of this activity for their survival. The move of individuals into the practice of illegal, informal, artisanal mining small scale is reinforced by the occupation of areas of gold extraction, which ends up creating enormous pressure on agrarian communities, and this has encouraged farmers to seek means of subsistence of informal gold mining. These two reflects two vision. It's most important to understand, for example, why the people go to work in the artisanal mining now, and what this implication for this activity for traditional community, this agrarian community. Nowadays, they are faced the problem of the food, the agriculture production is collapsing because no land to get production. As you see, this map is very interesting. All the map of the blue means the mining license. Yeah, you can see no land for the people because all the land is occupied for the big men with the government license, but the same license is very difficult to member of local community get it for this problem that I said before about the Barney contest. Yes. Yeah, my work seeks to reflect on this tensional conflict between state, local communities, and mining companies. There is actors are in different position within the artisanal mining sector, and local communities are at the base or bottom of the pyramid of the artisanal mining structure. This is small information about the district Manica, first region to practice the artisanal mining gold category in Mozambique. Gold it was always exploited by population places, more age sold to companies local established. Nowadays, it's very difficult to local population be this practice or be this activity. 1970, it was first team created government to give assistance to the artisanal mining sector. From this year, the government started to pay attention to this sector. But we can do some balance from that year until today. Less thing was made for them, protected them. This is very important. Reason for practicing informal mining. The indicators of poverty, unemployment, and illiteracy of ample opportunity to understand the motivation behind of adherence of considerable numbers of individuals to the practice of golden is a mining in Manica. Is in one the motivation. When we look at the legal instrument of mining, we will find the main contradiction about these three principal instruments: the land law, the mining law, and the environment law. The first law says the land belongs to the state. Communities have the right to use and the benefits from the land where they have lived for many generations. This is most important to understand this phenomenon. Second law says natural resources belong to the state, and only the state decided through community consultation. But this consultation is optional. Rarely the local community has been consulted when the government needs this land. The first says that approval of the gold mine exploration project depends on the environment impact plan. This is most important too, but the local community no have capacity to present this impact environment plan to government. This is most important, that's why have been the principal argument from the government. Yeah, okay, we'd like to facilitate your mining license. You don't have impact environment plan. So we have no capacity to present them. No money, the bureaucracy sector is very complicated. This contributes to get out always the local community. And at the same time, they are the reason who can be deeply the conflict between the state institution specific sector with local community. Despite the mining law providing small benefits to local communities, amounting 10% of what is exploited by investors, complies with this rarely occurs. The local community practically gain nothing from own natural resource. Another slide. Okay. This picture is illustrate how hard this work in the Manica land, but at the same time, you can see this principal river river is most important to agriculture practice in local community, and sometimes to give the water to local consume. But nowadays, it's not possible to use this water or this river because it's completely polluted because they are using the mercury. Yeah, this is a complicated situation. However, the violence in the artisanal mining world have been happened, and three main different actors are involved: mining operators, prospectors, mining companies, local communities, and the state. It's very interesting. These conflicts are characterized by aggression and territorial disputes over gold miners. Violent clashes between gold miners, policy repression and environmental enforcement, and security measures for private mining companies against local communities and illegal miners. It's very complicated. This sphere is very interesting because I'm just presenting the typologies of conflict for the control mine, and there's consequence or some characteristics. I choose three typologies of the conflict in the artisanal mining in Manica land. Conflict over control the mining, illegal mining, disregard of social agreements, and environment crisis and pollution. The consequence is very interesting. In addition to conflict with states, tension are recorded within the communities themselves caused by illegal mining. Violent confrontation between local miners and foreign miners of control of gold miners, such as the Six Car mine in the Vandus district close very Manica land due to weak oversight and security. Second conflict, land exploration and non-compliance with social responsibility agreements by mining companies. This is a problem too. Prominent case occurred in the Nyampasa region, Baro district, close Manica, where the local population were invited tourmaline mine and protest against the companies. This district is close and make the same border and the same people moving to the same area. Can be in Manica or can be in Baro, Nyampasa, sorry. The last kind of conflict is several pollution for local rivers, such as Revolt and water contamination by mercury. Government actions. The government has repeatedly suspended mining activities and initiated criminal protections against companies for environment crimes. Impact on the community. The shutdown has left 1,004 local workers unemployed, leading miners of disobey state degrees because they depend on the activity for their livelihood. Informality is not the same thing. Informality means resistance. O ouro está na nossa terra, mas não nos pertence. This means in English, the gold is in our land, but it does not belong to us. Here, we see the law in the conflict with local population give their alienation from access to gold extraction. They are poor population who have to survive, but do not have access to the natural resources that are in their areas of residence. Informality, while being illegal or violation of the law, is also a form of resistance. The miners and local populations say that they have no work, but they need to support their family. We are here why we don't have work or employment. I am looking to win money, lack of conditions to eat. I live alone just with children. This is artisanal mining activity is illegal because the people need to survive. And some conclusion. While they are poverty, they will be the artisanal mining. In general, is more or less distinct. The government attempts to enforce mining laws, not only significant weakness, but above all, resistance of the communities and mining operators in search of survival alternative. This picture, environment, peace, poses a major challenge. Thank you very much.
All right, so our last presentation.
We're almost there, everyone.
Is
Noon.
about the sacred. And
Sacred.
Sacred, yeah, governance.
All the great things, definitely.
There we go, so.
Hey, everyone, last presentation, we're all almost there. This is a paper I've been working on for a little bit, and I'm building on from a presentation I gave at the Harvard Davis Center a couple of months ago. And in it, I'm looking at the convergence of religion, gold extraction, and governance, particularly in the case of reproduction. So one of the most informative classes I ever took was my freshman year anthropology class. And in it, I was introduced to Emil Durkheim, who defined religion around the sacred, the divine, revered, and which is set apart, versus the profane, the ordinary, mundane, or dirty, and it involves the elementary forms of the religious life. Similarly, Mary Douglas, she revolutionized the study of dirty things in her 1966 classic, Purity and Danger. She famously defined dirt as simply matter out of place and argued that societies separate the sacred from the dirty to enforce social order and their categories. And here, my questions were not so much that religion is a holy mask over a greedy economy, but religion is a tool. It's the thing that can make it cheap to tax people who otherwise would be almost impossible to tax. And in this place, gold and God and governance have never been really inseparable. And the reason generally tends to be economic before it is actually religious. And one of the questions I had, and particularly as I've been here today, is the question of like that theory seems to tell us at times when we're looking at resource and extraction that religion is a cover story. It's a greed versus grievance model, and reducing ideology to an excuse for taking the loot. Not that that can't be true, but it can diminish the power of what the divine can be. And so, but why does moral language do this work? And I think, and as I talked through the case of reproduction, the short version is this: a ruler who plans to stay taxes instead of looting because he wants the resources alive next year. But taxing is expensive to enforce unless people see the tax as fair, as predictable, in which case they mostly comply on their own and your costs drop. Over time, a repeated protection arrangement hardens into something also that can look like a state. And in that process, taxation goes way beyond just funding authority. It can create it. And I think there's another distinction. The question is never really like whether a resource can be looted, it's how it's also extracted. Is this hard to tax individuals by large firms, as we talked about earlier today? And particularly when we think about like artisanal alluvial gold, and dredged from riverbeds. is the hard to tax, in this case, the purest form. And moreover, you have to tax people in the case of what I'm talking about for these governments. And taxing people requires three things. You have to be able to see them, you have to be predictable, and you have to also be seen as legitimate. And I will introduce, that's right, the case of Badakhshan. For those who are not familiar, Greater Badakhshan is a really historic region spanning the Afghan border with Tajikistan along the Panj River. It's one of the oldest extraction frontiers. Lapis has moved out of the Kolcha Valley for a millennia. The region's mineral fame is ancient enough that Badakhshan's ruby and spinel mines were noted by Ibn Hafwa. Also, Marco Polo's account of the Badakhshan spinel mines is one of the oldest documented extraction restriction in the region. The stones were dug on the king's account. No one else dared to dig in that mountain on pain of forfeiture of life and goods, nor could anyone carry the stones out of the kingdom. What I'm talking about here is a royal monopoly plus export ban whose explicit logic in the fuller Yule text was scarcity maintenance restriction supply. So the stones retained their value as a diplomatic tribute. Moreover, what the record shows across the 8 centuries in Badakhshan is that it's not like an oscillation between a state and anarchy, as we go back to thinking about Emile Durkheim and Mary Douglas, but between different kinds of configurations of non-state and quasi-state resource rule. And it seems that the configurations that endure are those that embed extraction into these normative idioms. Royal prerogative, Islamic fiscal law, comes zakat taxing, or the national wealth of the people, rather than just pure naked tribute. This kind of builds on the text and scholarship of Olson, even Charles Tilley, Snyder, and Bhavani's work. But to profit from 10,000, Global Witness actually has a 2-year investigation found that, but I'm going to back up 5 steps and take a breath. So what we have established, obviously, is that mining has happened in Badakhshan for centuries. It's been documented, but even in the divine is also dirty. And Global Witness did a report around 2013 that found that Badakhshan's miners were facing a major source of conflict in the region, along with grievance, supplied $1 million of funding to armed groups, insurgents, and strongmen. And this only got worse after the Taliban retained control in 2021. And kind of what we see, so this picture is, what we see is, you can see the Panj River from 2022, and another picture taken just in February 2026 by a researcher from Afghanistan. And you actually can see how gold mining has not only, it's changed the morphology of the river itself. Dredging has actually made it shift closer and closer to Tajikistan. But so what does gold mining here do? We can see that it's physically changing the border, but there are political ramifications for that shift. And those political ramifications, include more conflict. Just this year, just throughout 2025, we saw increased insurgent attacks from Taliban for the first time, and Tajikistan has been increasing border developments on its own side. We also probably saw some reporting in 2025 of Chinese miners who were actually killed while being on the Afghanistan side, as well as the Tajikistan side for panning for gold. What this kind of looks like, bringing it back to sort of the religious and the sacred aspect on the Afghanistan bank, this armed sacralization taxation kind of has evolved into this more exclusionary state capitalist concessions with comes, permit trades, and sort of a recurrent lethal repression. On the Tajikistan side, which has a bit different. It doesn't necessarily fall into religion or sacred in the same way. It's more bureaucratized formalization. Tajikistan moved to simplify permits for individual production of alluvial gold along the Panj River in 2018. Yet by 2025, the finance ministry had issued around 261 individual licenses for alluvial mineral extraction, up from 223. And several licensed enterprises also included like Chinese backed companies as well, central banks, anchor the downstream, having actually put refined gold bars into free circulation in 2017. But so kind of going back to the main question, what kind of explains the difference in how religion, the sacred, is used to mine gold in this case? I think the first divergence starts with the coercive monopolization. Dushanbe spent a decade systematically destroying GBAO, which is Tajikistan's greater border sort of occupied autonomous zone, informal authority operations from 2012, 2014, all the way up into 2022, culminating actually into the assassination of several influential local leaders. And actually kind of has left into full control of illicit trade that is connected to gold mining along the Pamir Highway, which is actually where the Afghan state collapsed into commanders, and the Tajikistan has kind of like liquidated a lot of these permitting. There's also a lot of religious infrastructure. The Sunni Hanafi fiscal law hands any armed Afghan actor ready-made mineral tax theology. Comparatively, the Pamiri Ismaili routes kind of have the sacred authority through the imam and the AKDN service provision, which kind of leaves no doctrinal hook by which a local strawman can sacrifice gold rings on the Tajikistan side. So there's a little bit of difference on how informal leaders can like retain legitimacy. Finally, one of the ways that this is politically also being reshaped and is differentiated between Afghanistan and Tajikistan is deposit and market structure. On Tajikistan's side, there's minerals are more like gems. Gold is not used to the same extent that Afghanistan's Taliban are using and rely on gold, because it's smuggable. It has a more tinier labor footprint, and the big Tajik gold sits a little bit further away. And finally, another differentiation between Afghanistan and Tajikistan here is sort of external patron alignment. While China has capital on both sides of the river, the Tajik side kind of reinforces more of its existing sovereign, whereas like on the Afghanistan side, it's being substituted for recognition and amplifies the regime's incentive to clear locals off the gravel. And then finally, I wanted to talk about one of the big questions, because it can sound as if like when we talk about sacralized like rule, is this just like predation that sounds pretty? Like, or are we romanticizing the idea of what the sacred or religion is doing in governance? Or is just this like really predation and racket? And what explains it, how and why? I would say for Afghanistan, restriction is primarily centered around like the idea of competitor and labor discipline, with rent centralization as the goal. For example, residents seeking permits are refused while like insiders are licensed. Residents also repeatedly are approached by the ministry for permits and can be denied, while Taliban affiliated individuals obtain them really easily through bribes or promised gold shares. Some reporting describes like the mechanism as an explicit permit trade. And in January 2024, several local leaders protesting a gold mine were actually executed. So there is a lot of predation that does happen. It's not just we are using religion and it's gorgeous and divine and golden. But I do think that it can be said that like on the greater that restrictions in Greater Badakhshan are best modeled as rent protection, competitor, labor disciplined, and also kind of wrapped in this Sharia status and occasionally atop a sacral substrate that shapes language and compliance rather than just designating no-go zones. I keep on messing up between my laptop and this. The same similar problem, I have to work on that. So my final question I have been thinking about is just, which ecological harms get sanctioned, which condemned by what logic, and who really bears the cost. I think as we saw by the river that has already changed shape, getting closer to one side than other. What that does is it creates more political conflict, but it also impacts communities, as many of my fellow panelists have mentioned. Pistachio mines have actually been ruined on the Tajikistan side from the river changing shape. And it's creating more and more cross-border conflict between the two. So while religion and gold have been part of Badakhshan's history, and they have been co-opted by the Taliban government and by the Tajikistan government in different ways. I think that there needs to be more attention paid towards how religion is being used in governance and the long-term impacts in communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have questions.